Hi, I'm Tony Russo, and this is In Case You Missed It from Kates-Boylston for the week ending Thursday, February 21st, 2025. This episode is sponsored by Passages International. Looking for a way to honor your loved one while honoring the planet? Passages specializes in eco-friendly funeral products made from renewable, biodegradable materials. Whether it's a stunning willow casket, a biodegradable urn for scattering, or their unique memorial keepsakes, Passages helps create meaningful goodbyes that tread lightly on the earth. Join the movement toward greener funerals. Visit passagesinternational.com and discover how you can celebrate a life while protecting the planet for generations to come. Link in the show notes. First up, I guess the Matthews party has come to an end. This is probably one of the last reports I'll do on Matthews earnings for this quarter. Today, as I record this, is February 20th, Thursday. Matthews International shareholders voted to keep the current board of directors. They voted for the slate proposed by the board of directors over the slate proposed by Barrington Capital, which was trying to change the way things were happening at Matthews. Now, it has been a strange week. Even if you follow me online, I got to a point where I was no longer posting all of the arguments because the back and forth got pretty heated toward the beginning of this week, I guess, as you're listening to this, if you're hearing it on Friday anyway. And at some point it just got to be more than I could possibly share or expect anybody to read. And I think that it was just everyone trying to make their last ditch arguments for why they should be in charge of the company. A lot of Proxy advisors came out on Barrington's side, but also this week, and I want to read this to you because I don't have the guy's name on the top of my head. Thomas Gebhardt was appointed to the board of directors. There was a director who was supposed to be leaving in the next year or so anyway, and rather than wait for after the proxy vote, Matthews went ahead and appointed him. He is an electric vehicle specialist. He knows about this company. Why is that important? Because if you haven't been following along, Matthews just won a huge victory in an argument with Tesla over whether it owned this energy storage technology. And that's really all we need to say about this. After all, this is a funeral program. I didn't think I'd be spending nearly as much time as I have in the last 6 months talking about electric vehicles. The short version is they put him on to help shore up their move into the EV space, which they are now free to do. The other thing that Matthews did was it changed its structure, or proposed a change, which was accepted, to its structure so that the board of directors is now elected every year instead of on a kind of rolling basis, which had been the case. And I think those two particular moves may have been the deciding factor for several of the big voters. I know that a company that I pronounced Gameco, and there's a link in the show notes if it's pronounced differently. I've not been able to find it. They essentially argued, and I mentioned this a couple weeks ago, I think, that the board of directors should get one more shot. And it is because all of the changes that Barrington was calling for have now been made. The argument about whether Matthews made them because of Barrington or whether they were making them anyway and Barrington didn't know they were making them and made these suggestions, that's an argument that is no longer relevant, although that's pretty much what the emails going back and forth this week were. The short version is Barrington got most of what it wanted except the dismissal of CEO Joe Bartolacci and control of the Matthews board of directors. And I think that this is at least acting as a wake-up call to the Matthews Board of Directors if it needs to be woken up. And that's something that only the board really knows, right? I mean, the board said that it was doing all these things and Barrington didn't know. Barrington said the board wouldn't have done any of these things if we didn't light a fire on them. And that's also something that we as outsiders will never know. But what we will know is people will be watching what the board does very closely. And this was a close enough call that a lot of people got involved in it. It helped move the Matthews share price. And, check today. I do not know what the price has done overnight with all of these different announcements and the reactions to it. I will follow up if it is necessary. But for now, let's put this Matthews story to bed and say congratulations to Mr. Bartolacci for keeping his job and encourage him to either continue doing what he's been doing or start doing what he's just started doing, depending upon whose argument you believe. A link to the main story in the show notes, and in that main story, you'll see lots of other links to many of the other arguments that were made running up to the Proxy fight. The NFDA sent along a notification that the US Post Office is changing the rules, or has changed some of the practices for mailing cremated remains. Now, of course, the post office is the only way that cremated remains can be sent in the U.S. And this, I'm going to just go ahead and read it to you. It's effective March 1st. The Postal Service is amending Publication 52, Hazardous, Restricted, and Perishable Mail, by requiring mailers to solely use the cremated remains shipping supplies provided by the post office when mailing human or animal cremated remains, also referred to as cremains or ashes, domestically or internationally. It's a small change. The link that I had sent out on my LinkedIn page was to the post office rules, and as it turned out, the post office hadn't amended their rules yet. So what I shared was dated 2019, which was the last time. It's interesting though that 2019 was the last time the post office looked at its cremated remains policy. But there's apparently a special box that says cremated remains on it, so that way you don't have to check any boxes or make anything special. I'm going to read just a couple more of the rules according to the post office so that I have informed you that way you'll know at least as much as I do, and probably more. All cremated remains must be sent via Priority Mail Express service, and they must be packaged according to the post office rules, and it lists the rule numbers. Mailers must use one of the special Priority Mail Express cremated remains branded boxes. It's called box-CRE, all caps, which are available at USPS.com. And extra services permitted with these mail pieces are limited to additional insurance and return receipt. A link to the new rules in the show notes, and you have 9 whole days to get to the post office and get yourself some new boxes or to order them, but they will not come in 9 days. If you've ever ordered anything from the post office, nothing takes longer to get than postal supplies that you order from the post office, which just always amuses me. Anyway, link in the show notes. So I thought that the saga between the Quake Bushes and Brooks Township had come to an end when they won their lawsuit against the township, but I was mistaken. And so now I will continue to report on this until there is a resolution one way or another. For the last year or so, I've been reporting on, maybe more than, I've been reporting on the struggle this couple has had trying to open a conservation cemetery near Brooks Township, Michigan. If you're not familiar, a conservation cemetery is just a place where you're allowed to put bodies directly in the ground. You are not allowed to have had them embalmed. They do not use headstones or monuments of any kind. Some people will put a boulder. Some people will put, will bury it near a tree and use GPS to find their loved one. But this is essentially a sanctuary for the forest. It's a forest that's going to stay a forest, and also a place where the human remains of people who want to be buried there are buried. This terrifies like 6 people in Brooks County, and in Brooks Township. And I think that they're terrified that they're not going to be able to put condos there in another 6 months or whatever. They're eyeing up what they really want to use this forest for, because there's literally, you may as well pass a law saying that deer dying in the forest is against the law. That's how much of an effect the decomposition of living tissue has on the water rights. But anyway, so they lost in court. Brooks Township did, and it was actually a pleasure to report on it, because they were very arrogant when they went in. They didn't want to present the case. They said that they wanted the judge to just decide on the merits of the original argument whether or not the town could just put a blanket ban of cemeteries because they didn't like the way this one would be run. The judge laughed at them and found for the Quake Bushes, who went ahead and were getting ready to start their business. And rather than just take the L, the town has now set new ordinances about where cemeteries can be, and they have made it so you can't have a cemetery within, I think it's like 1,000 feet of a well or 900 feet of a school. It was like they picked this place out and said, what's it near? That's where it's illegal to have cemeteries. And so one feels like they're going to end up back in court. I am glad that I'm not a taxpayer of Brooks Township who has to keep funding this madness. But I do have another, maybe a happier conservation cemetery story coming up next, but there'll be a link to both of them in the show notes. For this next story about another conservation cemetery, I want to recommend that you really take a moment and click on the link in the show notes, because there's a long feature and the whole story is worth telling, and it's well written and it's worth reading. But I do want to just give you, a chance to look at it, and I want to talk about what I think it means more than what it says. But the shortest version is there is a land trust, a Jefferson Land Trust in Washington State. It's an island in Washington State, is considering opening a conservation burial ground. It has come into possession of this large parcel through a donation. The owner can't keep it up anymore, or isn't going to keep it up anymore, and they have already dialed back what it can be used for, so it's not good to developers, which has driven down the land price and made it mostly not very valuable to anyone except a land conservancy. But the land conservancy wants to be able to do a better job in maintaining it, and this is just chasing down the weeds and making sure the undergrowth doesn't get bad. Just again, conservation, not development. And so it's considering getting into the cemetery business, and this is preliminary. But what it would like to do is open up a conservation cemetery and use the sale of plots to fund the conservation efforts on that piece of property, which is not just really interesting, but one wonders if it's not right to call it a trend, but it could be a trend. I can see land conservancies, especially as things tighten up and government funding gets a little bit harder to get, finding a way to finance their land conservancy projects by using the conservation cemetery model. And it's not a fortune maker, as the Quake Bushes will tell you, but it is a way to at least make enough money to maintain the land in a safe way so people can walk and enjoy it, because that is the idea behind all of these conservation cemeteries. It's a way for people to commune with nature and a way to keep the land a place where people can go and contemplate and hike and enjoy themselves. And if you think of all the stories we hear about the, cemetery, the rise of park type cemeteries in the late 19th century and early 20th century, this is not unsimilar. So it'll be interesting to see. I've seen a couple of stories already about conservation cemeteries. I haven't paid particularly close attention to whether or not they're owned by land conservancies, but I'm gonna keep an eye out for now. And for our friends who are in the cemetery business, because I know that there are lots of you who listen, this might be an option. I don't know precisely how it would work, but I've mentioned before that if you have undeveloped land, there's no reason why you couldn't look at it as a conservation cemetery type place. This is something that thousands of people aren't clamoring for this, but it is something that some people want. And I mentioned last week that we've got this great story coming out in American Cemetery and Cremation about how to increase your cemetery sales. And I just want to bing that one again. If you haven't gone and registered for American Cemetery and Cremation, this is the one article is absolutely worth at least taking a trial run at it. But anyway, a link to the story in the show notes. It's got all the backstory. This place used to be a golf course, and this person purchased it with their own money just to keep it from falling into complete disarray. And now that person's time is over, and they're looking to see how they're going to be able to keep this a going nature preserve without having the kind of funding that you need to have a nature preserve. And Conservation Cemetery looks like it might fit the bill. So link in the show notes, check out the story. I would love to hear your feedback on this. And last but not least, I do want to let you know that we have we have completed announcing the speakers and the topics for our funeral service business plan conference. It is a one-day conference in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania on April 1st. You can find a link in the show notes where you can see the speakers and what they'll be talking about, and you can register to come. If you would like to come and you would like a free ticket, you can reach out to me. I am Tony Russo I'm Anthony Russo. You can reach me at A Russo, that's A like Anthony, RUSSO, at kbpublications.com. That's K like kite, B like boy, publications.com. Say, hey, I heard this on the podcast and I would like a free ticket to the event, and I will send you a code. I have a limited number, so there are a couple left. If you're hearing this now and it is Friday or it is Monday, you probably still can reach out, and I would love to hear from you, and I would love to see you there. We're gonna have a blast. It's gonna be an excellent event, and that is it for this week. In case you missed it, is a Kates-Boylston production. It was written and edited by me, Tony Russo. Please let me know what you think. Let me know how things are going. I would love to hear from you. If you choose not to email me, you also can telephone me and leave a voicemail, and I would be happy to play it on the air if it's something that's not mean to anybody but me. My phone number is 732-746-0233, extension 709. That is 732-746-0233, extension 709. And I will check in with you next week.